Has anyone who loves you ever noticed a change in you before you were willing to admit it to yourself? Not asked about it directly, just mentioned it sideways, the way she did to me. You seem different lately, at breakfast, like it was nothing, like she wasn't watching me closely enough to catch something I hadn't even claimed yet. I sat with that comment for days afterward, turning it over, since nothing about my routine had felt different enough to explain a change she could apparently see so plainly from across the table. Have you ever had to ask yourself what exactly someone else noticed about you that you hadn't noticed yourself? It's an uncomfortable question to sit with, honestly, admitting that someone watching from the outside caught something before you trusted your own perception of it. You've probably had that same experience in some form, a slow, quiet change so gradual you don't notice it happening in real time until someone who knows you well enough points at it directly and forces you to actually look. I started asking myself what had actually shifted, going back through the past few weeks in my head. It didn't take long to land on the one small thing I'd started doing without telling her, or really without telling anyone. In a minute, I'll tell you exactly what it was. What I'd started doing, almost as an afterthought, was learning something real about my own body for the first time in years. An erection depends on 3 systems working together: hormonal, nervous system signal, and blood flow, governed by nitric oxide. That third piece, blood flow, responds directly to specific dietary compounds, something I'd never once looked into seriously before that point. I'd spent decades treating diet as something relevant only to weight and cholesterol, never once connecting food choices to this specific part of my health. Once I made that connection, I started reading nutrition labels with an entirely different kind of attention. These days, I have consistently more energy through entire evenings, not just isolated moments of it. I've started staying up later reading, something I'd quietly given up years ago when evenings started feeling like something to survive rather than enjoy. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because the change was gradual enough that I genuinely hadn't clocked it myself until she did. I sat with that comment for days, turning it over, trying to figure out what specifically she meant, since nothing about my routine had felt different enough to explain it. Here's what reframed everything else. The blood vessels involved here are some of the smallest in your entire circulatory system, smaller than the ones feeding your heart, so circulation issues tend to show up here first. Researchers who study this treat it as a meaningful early signal. It's one of the reasons doctors who specialize in this area often say that erectile difficulty can act as an early warning sign for cardiovascular problems elsewhere in the body, sometimes showing up years before a heart problem would otherwise become obvious through any other symptom. For 3 years, I slept 3 feet away from my wife, and it felt like 300 miles. She'd fall asleep first. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, wide awake, feeling like a roommate in my own marriage. I thought something was wrong with me. It wasn't weakness, and it wasn't just age. Here's what no one ever sits a man down to explain. This isn't about willpower. It's about specific systems in your body quietly losing steam year after year, while nobody tells you it's even happening. The pills my doctor handed me gave me headaches, made my chest feel tight, and honestly, they made me feel like I needed a pill just to feel like a man. I wasn't willing to live like that. There's a gentler way to bring those systems back, without any of that. At 83, my wife and I aren't roommates anymore. I'll show you exactly what changed it in this video, and if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. So here's the small habit I'd mixed into my nightly routine. Fresh watermelon, served as a light dessert most evenings, specifically because of a natural compound in it called L-citrulline. There's a real controlled study on men with mild to moderate erectile difficulty using watermelon extract, and 50% of the men improved on this exact approach, versus just 8% on a placebo. Citrulline converts in the body into arginine, a direct building block for nitric oxide, the exact molecule that opens up blood flow where it's needed. It was cheap, it was easy, and honestly, I mostly did it because I liked the taste and figured it couldn't hurt. I never announced it or made it into a project. It just quietly became part of most evenings, which might be exactly why the change crept up on both of us the way it did. Looking back, I think the lack of fanfare is exactly what made it stick. Nothing I've ever turned into a big production has lasted very long. The things that quietly become part of your routine, without ceremony, tend to be the ones that are still there a year later. I added a few other pieces once I noticed the shift myself. Vegetables rich in dietary nitrate, feeding the same nitric oxide pathway from a second direction. A short walk most mornings in real daylight, supporting the blood vessel lining directly. Better sleep, since a good part of the hormonal piece rebuilds itself overnight. Less alcohol, since it works against nearly everything else on the list. None of these felt like a project either. That was probably the real lesson buried in all of it. The things that actually stuck were the ones I never made a big deal out of in the first place. A few weeks after her comment at breakfast, my wife and I stayed up talking on the porch until almost midnight. No plan, no reason, and neither of us wanted the evening to end. That was the moment I finally understood what she'd been noticing all along, weeks before I ever said a word about it. I think about a man named Gerald, who wrote in, 68, who told me his own wife had made an almost identical comment weeks before he connected it to a small change in his own habits. He said there was something oddly moving about someone who loves you noticing an improvement before you're even confident enough to claim it yourself, almost more meaningful than the change itself. If you're on medication for blood pressure or your heart, please hear this clearly. Nothing here replaces your treatment, and you should never stop or change a medication on your own. Mention anything new to your doctor every time. Gerald said he'd asked his wife, half joking, how long she'd actually noticed before finally saying something, and her answer surprised him. Weeks, she said. She'd just been waiting to see if it was really lasting before she brought it up at all. Gerald told me that conversation alone was worth more to him than the physical change itself, learning just how closely she'd been paying attention all along, quietly hoping without ever pressuring him about it. He said it made him realize how much she'd been carrying silently, right alongside him, the whole time. What I want you to walk away with is this. Real change is often quiet and gradual, not dramatic. Sometimes the person who loves you notices it before you trust it enough to notice it yourself. I've come to think that's actually a sign the change is real, not a mark against it. Dramatic transformations tend to fade just as dramatically. The quiet, gradual kind, the kind someone else notices before you do, tends to be the kind that actually sticks around. Your erections don't disappear just because you got older. They fade when the systems behind them, blood flow, nitric oxide, hormones, energy, and recovery, slowly stop getting the support they need. Ignore that long enough, and it becomes harder to reverse. That's why I take this concentrated formula every morning. Not one ingredient trying to fix everything, but several working together to support circulation, energy, and drive from the inside out. It's a natural, doctor-backed protocol designed to support pathways your body already knows how to use. No prescription, nothing artificial. Stronger, present, confident again. And unlike the pills I tried, I didn't feel disconnected from my own body. No headaches, just steady, gradual change. My wife noticed before I even said a word. The presentation is linked right below this video. It won't replace your doctor or a healthy lifestyle. It's simply there to support your body. At 83, my wife and I aren't roommates anymore, and it's not too late for you. There's something almost humbling about it. You'd think you'd be the first to notice a change in your own body, your own energy, your own mood. But the people who watch us closely, day after day, often catch these shifts long before we're willing to trust our own perception of them enough to say so out loud. I think about the man I was, not even realizing something had changed until someone else pointed it out. And I think about the man I am now, who finally caught up to what she'd already seen. That's not vanity. That's dignity. I'd started a small habit a few weeks earlier, nothing dramatic enough that I thought it deserved attention. It felt too minor to even mention, the kind of thing you do without any expectation attached, more out of mild curiosity than real hope. I didn't even tell her I'd started doing it. If someone who loves you has ever noticed a change in you before you noticed it yourself, tell me in the comments. And if this kind of quiet, gradual explanation is useful to you, subscribe. There's more of this ahead.